What's going on, guys? It's your boy GS Luke here with our round 2 live stream for, of course, the Players Championship. Had a lot of fun out there on the golf course today. Was able to see quite a bit of the action out there in the afternoon, and it looks like we got a little bit of a weather edge over there for Friday. So going to spill the beans over here on this live stream, as well as go through any of your questions that you have down there in the chat, as well as some shots gained metrics, some strategy over there for Friday as well, and get you guys ready for all of your exposure. But first off, hopefully you're having a fantastic Thursday. We're going to get some dinner after we do the live stream here, so I'm looking forward to that. A little bit of prop stream, which will be either a little bit later on tonight, maybe tomorrow morning, out there for any of you prop betting folks or over there on the matchup side. And looking forward to Friday and, of course, the weekend over here for this fifth major. I see we got Go Collect down there. Welcome on in. Also, Joshua and Milky Way. We got Steven down there as well. We also got Sights down there in the chat too. And look at that. He's at 1.5x speed. And if you know, that is the way to go out there and watch these videos. But welcome on in yourself. Let's go ahead and hop on into what we saw for today. So in terms of the scoring averages today, that weather edge that I mentioned was towards the PM side, and it ended up shaking out to be about a 2-stroke difference. And as soon as I got to the golf course today, it was about noon, I noticed that it was getting hot in a hurry. It not only was getting sunnier out there in the afternoon, but it was 10 to even 15 degrees hotter than when I went out there and left my Airbnb. And I promise you, it's not all that far from the golf course. So the fact that it had that drastic a change told me that the golf course and the area in general was going to be a lot warmer for the afternoon. And I even mentioned on a tweet over there on Twitter that I thought it was going to play easier right over there in the afternoon. So obviously that ended up bearing out. I didn't think it was going to be a 2-shot difference, right, when I went out there and tweeted that early this afternoon, but it is definitely worth incorporating out there into tomorrow. Now, if we take a look at the top end of the leaderboard, there were a few guys that went off earlier that were still towards the top, most notably Lucas Glover, that still shot a -6, but guys like Rory McIlroy, right, shot -5, Akshay Bhatia out there in the afternoon as well. A vast majority of these guys that were -4, -5, -6 even, right, like 4 of the guys up there were guys there from the PM wave. There was definitely a bias towards that side of things. And when we take a look at the forecast over here for Friday, it does look pretty similar. But the one thing I'll note over here on the forecast, and I'm going to blow it up so I can see it a little bit better. It's not the same setup that I normally have here, but it's not as cold out there in the morning. So today it was closer to 50 degrees when they first teed off. Heck, it was in the, I believe, like 57, 58 degrees the whole way until like 10:30 local time. So tomorrow, it doesn't look like it's going to be as drastic a temperature change when it comes to the morning versus the afternoon. So I would think that the morning guys are going to play to an easier scoring average than what you had today. You add on top of the fact of that you have, the world top 3 over there in the PM wave. In general, I think in general, better players over there on the PM side of things today. I could see the quote-unquote split, right, the edge between the two waves being closer to like maybe a stroke difference over there for tomorrow. Hell, it might even be a little bit less than a stroke difference between the two waves. Does that mean that it's not important, right? Absolutely not. A stroke difference is still massive over there for Showdown, but I would say just temper your expectations a little bit if you think it's going to be a full 2-stroke difference again. So still something that you probably want to lean on out there towards those PM players, but I don't think it's anything that you have to go out there and go 100% on. In fact, if there are some late AM wave players that you want to use, so for example, right, guys towards the very end of those AM wave tee times, then I think they're in play, because you can see on here, it does look a little bit calmer when you're in your winds when it comes to this forecast. And it also looks like it's going to get warm right around 9:30, maybe 10 a.m. local time, which is warmer than what you had for today. So just to kind of show you what those tee times would look like, if we go over here to the tee time tab, of course, go over here to round number 2, the last few groups out would be about 9:41 local, which I would say would be ideal when it comes to your conditions. It would be guys like a Ventura, a Roy, a Suber, also this McGreevy, Gerard, Sapin group. But if you go up above that, right, there's a few other groups that I think you can include in that, maybe even the guys the whole way up until about 9 a.m. local time. So all of these guys that you see on the screen right now are players that you might want to give a slight little boost to in the AM wave. Now, outside of that, I would say go after a lot of those PM wave players, which means pretty much the entire bottom end of this tee time list are guys that you'd want to have in play. So these are more of your traditional plays, right? Going off the data that we had for round number 1. But I think if you're trying to find a few other players to sneak in there, you could go to the latter half of that AM wave. And another reason why I like some of these players is that they're in general relatively low owned, right? Like outside of maybe a Laurie Cantor, who's catching a little bit of steam. I mean, maybe a Siwoo Kim there at 908, right? He would be catching maybe 5 to 10% ownership. Carl Phillips, maybe like 5% ownership. Everyone else in that latter half of the AM wave are lower tier players, right? Mid-tier guys like a Johnny Vegas at the very best that you're not looking at chalk over there for round number 2. So, the added benefit would be that they're a little bit overlooked, I would say most likely, especially if everyone's going out there and only just playing the PM guys. So that's my take on the weather, right? All PM, maybe a sprinkle of some of those late AM guys, and could have an edge out there for Showdown tomorrow. Let me catch up on chat. We're going to go through the shots gained metrics now. So let me go ahead and actually refresh Data Golf here. I couldn't log in to bet the number. I think I'm having some issues with my account over there. So we're just going to use the Data Golf stats out there for this. Let's get them refreshed, and then also any specific player questions. Now is the great time to go ahead and throw those down in chat. We're going to go through some of the metrics that we had out there for round number 1 and explain how we can use those out there for Friday. But before we do so, let me catch up on where we left off. Boots on the Ground live show, that's for sure. He said, Luke, your boy, make you feel better about your 28% on Sanjay. What is he like +1, +2 or something like that? I don't think you should be tilting it all that much, right? It was a pretty tough day out there, especially when he was playing golf, Phil. And there could be worse takes, let's put it that way, right? You could have 15% Victor Perez like me, who go collect doesn't seem that happy with either. And, I dodged the Jason Day bullet. So I guess to maybe help you feel a little bit better, Phil, you could have had like 30-40% Jason Day, right? Now, I wasn't a donkey. I didn't go out there and play some Jason Day this week, but it could have been worse, right? You could have had 0 holes played right out there for your player. So maybe that makes you feel a little bit better there. Can I deep dive some JT? So yeah, if you're talking about Justin Thomas, horrible across the board. In fact, he had one of the worst ball striking days of all of 2025. And I'm not just talking about for him. I'm talking about for all players out there on the PGA Tour. I mean, look at this, right? He lost 9 strokes when it came to his ball striking today. Just under that, right? It's like 8.95 or something like that between the off the tee and approach play. If you're talking about JT, the main JT, it really didn't go well. If you're talking about Mr. Postman, who's, I think, a better play out there for DFS, he lost on approach, but he finally gained putting. We have been waiting for that for quite some time, and he was pretty solid off the tee. Unfortunately, his strength over the last month or so has been his approach play, and that kind of abandoned him over there for round number 1. So he's definitely got to get that sharpened if you're talking about the Postman. But yeah, between the two, JT Justin Thomas looks absolutely broken. I honestly have no idea what happened today. I wasn't there. What's going on, Marshall? You said play was suspended. You have a Glover first round leader and you're still sweating. Oh yeah, McGreevy's got like 2 holes left and he's 1 shot off that lead. I know someone else, Marshall, that also has a Glover first round leader ticket. I was already rooting for them a while ago, actually, out there with their bet. So best of luck out there with yours as well. I'm hoping that both of you can cash that. You saw Perez and instantly thought about me. Yeah, I played him in a few lineups, Phil, but he's a 6K guy, right? It happens. Trust me. I'm much happier that we had 2 withdrawals today and Jason Day at 11% withdrew than, my 1-2%er going out there withdrawing, right? Like I won today when it came to the withdrawals. I'm not going to sweat it all that much. What's going on, Anthony? Thoughts on Harman and Lowry for a bounce back play? So yeah, Harman's PM wave. I believe Lowry is as well. So it fits that sort of thing if that's your weather edge. You said both played okay outside of some around the green and putting mishaps. So yeah, let's go through the metrics so that we can show everyone what you found out there with those metrics because, that makes them really good plays. So I think you're spot on out there with what you said. You see there with Lowry, right? He lost 3 strokes putting. He looked great out there and approaching with the off the tee play. Who was the other one that you mentioned? Let's see. It was Harman. Yeah, good old Brian Harman. I watched him play a few holes out there. I didn't get to see a lot of his round or anything. He was a little bit more sporadic, I would say, right? Shane Lowry, the much more solid shots gained profile, but he still gained off the tee. He was a slight loser in the other 3 categories, about half a stroke over there in approach. I really like Lowry for tomorrow. I don't think that Harman's out of play by any means, especially because he looked really good on the range out there. On Wednesday, I watched him hit a lot of balls on the range, and he was working with a coach, which is sometimes a little bit of a red flag, but he was relatively comfortable, it looked like. I'm not against it, but I think Lowry's the better play. Russell Henley bounced back, lost strokes putting, but gained across the board otherwise. He won as well, right? So sometimes you have that hangover effect out there with some players. So the fact that he was this solid tee to green, and then his main issue was the 2 short game categories, as you mentioned. Right? In fact, right, lost about a third of a stroke over there around the green. So 3 strokes in total between those 2 categories. I would say that this is the sort of player that, what's his tee time? I guess we'd have to double check on that one real quick. I mean, if he's PM wave, then it's like all systems go out there in Russell Henley. And in fact, he is a PM wave player going over there at 1:40 p.m. local time. Yeah, it's a spot, like a perfect play, right? The exact example of what we're looking for. Shane Lowry, the same sort of thing. That tee to green play is what we want to be looking for. Nick Taylor, please. Okay, let's go through good old Nick, who, by the way, was chalkier this week than really what I was expecting. But if he's gaining on approach, it's hard to pass it up, and that's what he's been doing lately. So Nick Taylor lost on approach today and then lost with the putter. This losing with the putter has been a trend lately, so not that surprised that he wasn't going out there and making very much, but he was carrying himself with the iron play hitting in. That was why a lot of people wanted to use him this week, and then he lost strokes out there with the irons today. Now, could he bounce back? I think for sure. And what you're going to get if you play Nick Taylor tomorrow is the lowest ownership that he's had in probably a month. I mean, for main slate every single week, he's been like 7 to 10% owned, mostly because the DraftKings algorithm just like refuses to price him up for some reason. He's like always in the 6K range, so he always gets a lot of ownership. But at +2 for round 2 showdown, he's not going to be nearly as popular as what you've seen. In fact, I'd say he's probably 5% ownership at the very most, right about 5%, if not a hair below that. So if you're looking for a pivot play, you could go that direction. Is Hovland officially broken? I'm not somebody to call players broken unless it gets really bad. And, let's look at the shots gained. I guess that can give us a little bit of insight to how it went today. I didn't get to see a lot of his round. He lost 3 strokes off the tee and then about 5 strokes over there with the putting. It's hard to say that he's broken when like his approach play has been decent lately. His off the tee play has normally been a lot better than what you had out there for today. The putter has been an issue. Like you take a look at his last few events, he's had average shots gained of like a shot lost per round. I mean, it's just ugly stuff right out there for Viktor Hovland. But I'm kind of afraid to call guys broken because, the ball striking is normally what I'm looking for, and it doesn't look that far off. Now, is he off right now? For sure, but it's not that far off. Postman bounce back, I would say it's in play, Kim. We went through the shots gained metrics for him just a little bit ago. At least when you're comparing him to the other JT, right, Justin Thomas, he's got a much better chance of that bounce back. So I'm not against that one at all. So let's go through what we saw in general today. So I'll go back to chat here in a second and see if there's any other deep dives that you guys want me to do. But in terms of what we saw in general today, I usually like to look at the approach play and find some poppers that are going off in the PM wave. Now, I know McElroy and Rio are going off in the AM wave, so they don't really fit what we're looking for. But I believe Ben Coles is a PM wave guy. I guess let's double check on good old Ben Coles, who is a streaky player. He's unfortunately going to be an AM wave starter, so that is not what we're looking for either. I know Will Zalatoris, he will be a PM wave guy. You can see he gained over 3 strokes over there with the irons. Jake Knapp is AM, so not really towards the top end of my short list. But like a Matt McCarty, I believe, I know for a fact McCarty's, actually, let's just double check that. I believe for sure, right, going to be a PM wave. So there he is. And then Tom Hoagie as well, I believe also another PM wave player. So, if we're looking towards the top end of the approach list here and trying to find some of those poppers, like a Hoagie, McCarty could be plays down there in that 6, 7K range. Could be looking at Zalatoris as one of those 8K range plays that, by the way, I think will get some ownership, but I don't think he'll be chalky there after a -2 rounds. Right, like same thing with guys like Hoagie, like he's not going to be a mega chalky either, right? Even McCarty there at -2, you're looking at average to at most maybe slightly above average ownership on any of those given players. So I think that they're definitely options, or at least in consideration out there for tomorrow. Trying to find a few more guys on here. A lot of these guys are going to be going off in the morning. So, it kind of shows you the difference in conditions. There's Russell Henley, as we already went through before. So, like I mentioned, I think he's a fantastic option if you're a believer in those shots gained metrics. Let's see. Yeah, a whole bunch of guys that are going off in the morning. I believe Tom Kim. I might be wrong about this one. Let's see. So yeah, he's another AM wave guy. I was wrong about that one as well. Not a bunch of guys that we have to choose from on here. Like Berger's going to be another AM wave player. Now, let me see if any of them were the late AM wave, so maybe they get saved by that aspect of it. Like McGreevy, he had good approach stats, and he's towards the end of the AM wave. So if you're leading into any of those players, I guess he would be somebody that you could throw in there a little bit. Let's see, was Grayson Sig on that list? Yeah, Grayson Sig was, right? He was just under 2 shots gained over there on approach. He was horrible around the green and with the off the tee play. So if you saw my live stream, right, mentioning that I saw him over there at the liquor store, maybe it was giving him some trouble in those 2 categories. But if he survived the hangover and now he's heading over to Friday now with the let me see, is he on the right side of conditions as well? Actually, that's right. He was here towards the latter half of that AM wave. Like these guys can be in consideration as well out there for a few lineups. Going through the rest of these poppers here, a Fleetwood is AM wave. Yeah, not a lot of options that we have towards our side of the tee times. Like a pot guider down here will be, and by the way, pot guider, he lost 3 strokes over their short game, and on the putting green over there yesterday, I saw him really dialed in with the speed. Now, being dialed in with the speed, right, doesn't guarantee that you're going to make a whole lot of putts, right? Just having the speed right, doesn't get the ball in the hole. But if he could start to read the greens better with the kind of speed that I saw for him, I think that he's going to go out there and have some spike putting rounds. So the fact that he lost 3-stroke short game today and then gained 1.2 on approach makes him somebody, especially because he's on the right side of the tee times. So just to show you guys there, he's actually the last tee time over there in the PM wave. He could for sure be somebody that's in consideration for tomorrow. If we go over here to just off the tee play as well, right, it's another stat that we like to look at. That's where Shane Lowry really starts to separate himself from the field. Joel Damon, if you really want a grimy bounce back. The approach play, by the way, it looks like it's super bad there, right? 1.5 shots lost. He was a lot better than the shots gained would really indicate. Hole number 8 really did him in when it came to that shots gained approach. In fact, right, this hole over here, hole 5, where he lost a half a stroke right there alone. So I would say he was a lot better with the irons than maybe the stats would indicate. And then 4 shots gained lost with the putter, right? Probably not going to happen again. So, some of these guys here that were gaining a bunch off the tee, also over there on the approach play, like Austin Eckroat. Let's see, when is he teeing off? I believe he's AM wave, but just in case. So yeah, AM wave, unfortunately. If he was PM wave, he would have been the absolute nuts. But like a Ludwig Bear, I know is going off on the right side of tee times. Let's check on Hoey and let's check on. I don't think Kitayama's on the right side. But let's see. So yeah, Kitayama's not on the right side. Who is the other one we want to check? Let's check on Rico Hoey. I mean, Hoey's always been a solid ball striker, especially heading into this event. And you can see here, yeah, he's going off at the 2:35 tee time. So that's why going through these metrics, you have to be kind of careful with going through them, right? Because we want to make sure our players are on the right side of things. But if you can find players that are popping out here in these 2 different ball striking categories, and on the right side of things, there's a really good chance that they're going to be in my player pool. Now, some of the short game categories, I kind of weight in the opposite direction, right? Unlike off the tee and approach play, sometimes your short game comes down to luck. Like, we saw guys like Potgater that I really thought was going to make a lot of putts this week, lose 3 shots gained to the short game category. Now, maybe he was just dialed off, right? He doesn't like this grass type. Who knows, right? It could be a bunch of reasons why that ended up being the case. Or it could come back and regress back into the mean tomorrow. So, guys like Aaron Rye, who is on the right side of tee times, I wouldn't count on him to go out there and gain 4 strokes putting again. And it's kind of unfortunate because I bet him for top 10 this week, big top 20 bet. I went out there and took on Aaron Rye. He's going to have to be much better out there with the ball striking if he wants to go out there and repeat his sort of performance from today. So, the top end of this list in general are guys that be giving a slight downgrade to, and especially if they're going to be going off in the AM wave. You say the same thing about the around the green play. So, Jordan Spieth had the 2 chip-in eagles. So no crap, right? He had those 4 shots gained around the green, right? Wouldn't count on that happening out there from round to round. And Matt Kuchar also has an AM wave tee time tomorrow and gained 3 around the green, right? That feels very hard to go out there and reproduce. Camilo Villegas, same thing, will also have the AM wave tee time tomorrow and gained 5 strokes, actually a little bit over 5 strokes out there between the 2 short game categories. These are players that I expect to come back to the mean a little bit. And I know we had the question about Sungjae Im before. This stat profile does not look great, right? He lost in every category but around the green. And like even JT too, right? He gained in the 2 short game categories, but lost nearly 9 strokes over there with the ball striking. So these are players that give a slight downgrade too. You can see Nick Taylor is also on this portion of the list, right? Losing in those other categories. If you can find a low-owned player up here, like I'm not completely against using them. Like a Nick Taylor could still be usable. Christian Bazane, who could still be usable, especially because he gained like 1.5 strokes with the approach play. I don't even think Hideki's going to be that chalky, so I think you could use him as well. But if you're talking about somebody that has any remote amount of ownership, right, you should probably run the other direction. So, for example, like a Laura Cantor, I think an Akshay Bhatia might get some ownership for tomorrow. Those are the kind of guys I'd be a little bit more hesitant about going out there and playing myself. But other than that, that's really what I look at out there for your round 1 stats, right? It's not like we're at rounds 3 or 4 yet where we have a lot more of a sample size to work with. The one thing I'll say about these is that you don't want to overreact to just a 1-round sample size. You're going to get people out there that do that, right? For example, some of those players like Justin Thomas, a Nick Taylor that lost a bunch of strokes over there with the approach play, you're going to see some of those guys bounce back. So just because somebody has a horrible shots gained record doesn't mean that you have to completely scratch them off your list. But as I was mentioning out there towards the end there, only use those sort of players if they are a low-owned pivot, right? Don't take them if you have to play them in 20 to 30, 40% of your lineups to go out there and get that leverage. If they're like a 7 to 10% little flyer play, like what I took for Victor Perez this week, right? He withdrew, kind of unfortunate. But, if it's on one of those sprinkle kind of plays, you're not going to feel that bad about it if they go out there and fall flat on their face. Those sort of players that are like 5 over par, 4 over par, like some of those guys that really suck today, if they start 2 over par early in their round, they're probably going to bitch quit, right? And try and get out of there relatively quickly. You just kind of got to accept that, right? With some of those players that you're using, but also know that if you hit on one of those players, that you're sharing them with essentially nobody, right? They're going to be pretty much unknown over there in those GPPs. So I don't want to completely talk you off of some of those players because I may have a few of them over there in my player pool, but they're not going to be guys that I'm building around, right? Using as core plays, that sort of thing. So hopefully it gives you guys an idea of how to use these shots gained metrics. On top of that, of course, you also have the SHIPIT Nation Stone over there on the site with things like round 2 historical. You have the approach series, the putting series over there as well. So go out there and find some players out there that way. You combine that with some traditional shots gained analysis, try and find some high upside players out there for your player pool, maybe some course history players to go out there and mix in as well. I usually look for some putting in short game regression players as well. So like, I know we looked at some of the positives out there in both categories, but guys that lost a bunch of their short game, but that were decent with their ball striking, like you could look for them for a little bit of a bounce back. Now, Tom Kim doesn't have the best tee time, but he'd be one of those players, right? With his 2 shots gained that he lost there around the green. Campos, like all these guys towards the bottom here, like especially like a Grayson Sig here that you could see gained those 2 strokes on approach, like he'd be a prime candidate out there for tomorrow, especially because he's in that late AM wave, as we mentioned before. But putting, same thing, right? Guys that lost a whole bunch of strokes here, if they've got the right side of tee times, like a Joel Damon, if you can go out there and grind out a -2, -3 rounds, which, by the way, +1 could make the cut. So it's not like he's completely out of reason to go out there and make the weekend, that he could be one of those players that you go and mix in at low ownership. But, that little disclaimer that I put out there before about only taking them at low ownership is really important to remember out there in your lineups. And I don't think you have to get this cute unless you're in those large field GPPs, right? The big 5, the big $25 GPPs that you have for tomorrow, which, by the way, contest selection that we'll go through here in a second does look pretty solid over there for tomorrow. The GPPs especially, they've got some meat to them over there for round number 2. If you're in those sort of contests, I think these guys make sense to really get different to the field. But if you're in a cash lineup, like you have no reason at all, right, to be taking these sort of players. Even if you're in like a smaller field single entry, right, with just like a couple hundred other people you're playing against, it's not even that necessary, right, to get to pivots like that. So just know the kind of contest that you're entering, right? Know how much risk that you really have to take on. If you're in a GPP, your risk tolerance should be pretty high, right? You should be going out there taking on some of these lower owned diamonds in the rough sort of options. In other contests, maybe not so much. Where we leave off. So we get let's go back to easy bets. He said, "What's up, Luke? Finally catching another one live. Love to have you down there in the live chat. Let me know if you have any questions." Steven says, "Do I have anything better Anything on better between 1 versus 10 in terms of starting is I guess what you're saying there. You threw me off with your wording, but yeah, if you're starting on 1 versus 10, top of my head, I don't see a massive advantage. Looking at the stats from today, though, if you're starting on the front 9, you do get to play 9 here, which is a par 5. 10 played relatively easy, and then you have that par 5 there at 11. So maybe a slight lean out there towards starting on 1, just because you have that kind of setup. And, 17, 18 are usually pretty difficult, especially 18, right? One of the hardest holes that you have out here on the golf course. 1 can be scoreable, especially depending on that pin location. But yeah, I wouldn't say there's anything that big, right? I'm not really changing my process to account for it. What I always say about these situations is even when there is like a clear side that has that advantage, which this kind of qualifies. Like this is, I'd say, if you're going to choose between the two, you definitely want guys starting on 1. Is even if there is an advantage to it, it's usually worth like 0.2 DraftKings points. And it's actually, you can go out there and calculate, right, how many points it's worth. You can, take the birdie rates of all these different holes, maybe 8 through 10, maybe 9 through 11, whatever the case may be, to go out there and find that sort of streak. You can take the highest probability, which in this case would be 9 through 11, right? You'd multiply those together, get it'd be like product ownership, like what you're doing out there in the lineup. But you take that product ownership, right, of those 3 different players there, and then you'd see how many points that's actually worth, right? And what you'd end up finding, because let's see, it's like a 38% birdie rate, 23% birdie rate. So that's like a 7% between those two. It's another like 35 there. So it's like a 2.5%, let's call it. I'm just estimating, right, between those 3 numbers there. Let's say it's like a 2.5% outcome. They go out there and actually get that birdie streak. That's worth, in a birdie streak's worth 5 points, right? That means, let's call it 2% because the math is just a little bit better there. That means it's worth like 0.1 DraftKings points out there in your exposure. So that would be in this kind of scenario, right? Maybe a 0.1 shot difference out there towards that side, which means nothing at the end of things. So, if you're completely torn on 2 players, right, you've got everything the same, right? Shots gained metrics, they have the same sort of upside, maybe same ownership, which it's going to be hard to find players that are actually that close in projection. If one's going off 1 and one's going off 10, maybe you take the guy starting on 1, right? Just so that you could get that advantage. But that's really the only situation that I would do that. What's going on with Wyndham Clark? So the shots gained metrics, I guess, will tell us a lot about what he did today. I also want to take a look at the tee time if we can real quickly. So let's do that before I even go through the shots gained here. So good old Windy C is going off in the PM wave like we'd hoped for. And the short game let him down today, which I've got to say is surprising. I mean, he's one of the best putters that we have in the world. Around the green, he's not elite in that category, but I'd say he's stout, right? Normally gaining out there with shots gained around the green. This looks like a bounce back profile, especially now that he's on that PM side of things. Ball's going to be traveling a little bit further, which for a bomber like Wyndham Clark is always nice to let him really lean into that off the tee distance. I like Windy C. I think he sets up well, especially from the stat perspective. Sam Stevens is a late starter. How did he look? So let's take a look at the shots gained. Today, he gained off the tee, but lost on approach. And then just to double check that tee time there. So yeah, he's a 1:07 tee time. So I didn't know whether you meant like late AM wave or over there in the PM like he is. This is like a low-owned flyer sort of play. Like at T99, you're looking at sub 5% ownership over there in the Sam Stevens. So if you need to get different, especially large field GPPs, is the kind of guy that you use for that purpose. Going off of 10 better for streak potential? No, I think starting off 1 is actually a little bit better for that sites. But was Sig at the liquor store today? No idea because I didn't stop by there. In fact, we're trying to take it a little bit easy today to get ready for the weekend. So no liquor store trips for sure. Thoughts on Schmid? So first thing I'll say about Matty Schmid, before you even look at the stats, is that he makes a shit ton of birdies. So I love him for Showdown normally. Now, I want to double check on the tee time before we look at the shots gained, which he is on the right side of things, which is good to see. The shots gained today were not great though, right? He shot +6. So this is the kind of guy that you would only use, and I mean only, in a big $5 or $25 GPP. There's no reason to bring on this sort of risk in a single entry or cash sort of contest. Now, if you are in that big $5, big $25 GPP, you're looking at sub 3, maybe even sub 4% ownership at the very most, I would say, over there on a Matty Schmid. Hell, in some contests, you might even be like sub 2% ownership out there in a few cases. he's your lottery ticket to getting different, but outside of that, I don't see the utility. Shout out to 1.5x, caught up our guy Denny putting solid and JT sprang it off the tee. Everything's right. Yeah, you're right. Everything is back to normal out there at those two. And Denny McCarthy, let's hope he continues to putt it because I've got some exposure, that's for sure. And he said, not sure if it was mentioned, but who hit the best shot that I saw live? He said, hope I had a solid day one. I didn't mention who had the best shot today, but that's definitely a fair question, Ross. And it's kind of unfortunate. I didn't really think about it till you mentioned it, but the best shot I saw today was Adam Hadwin at hole 11, and it buried me on a prop. I faded him today. And, Adam Sadwin, as I call him sometimes, you make fun of somebody too much, and they're really going to want to go out there and stick it to you. He had 245 into hole 11 into a stiff wind. So it was not an easy shot. It was over a bunker. Water was in play down the right. So scare factor was there too. He hits a 3-wood to like 8 feet. Now, he missed the putt, did not make an eagle, ended up making the birdie, but it didn't matter. He ended up burying me for my prop anyway. So I've got to say, tip of the cap where the tip is due. He went out there and hit an absolutely nutted shot. But I saw a few other good ones too. I saw a lot of good putts, I'd say, especially like 20-footers. I saw quite a few of those made. And that 3-wood kind of stuck out. It was nasty. I've got to say, it was a front pin too. And it only rolled out like 5-6 feet. I couldn't hit that shot for my life if it depended on it. How did Bud Colley look? Thanks. And of course, I got you, dude. I didn't see him out there on the course. Didn't get to see how he actually looked out there, but he gained off the tee and then gained a bunch of putting. I would say that it's highly unlikely that he's going to gain this 4 strokes putting, but let's say that he gains like a half a stroke in that category and then does the same thing from tee to green. It's an okay round right there. So I don't think he sets up terribly out there for tomorrow. It's just that, this nuclear round, this -4 that he shot today was a lot down to the putter, which a lot of times people would say would be unsustainable. So do with that what you wish. All right, let's go through some of the contests from today, what we have out there for round number 2. Like I mentioned, some pretty sizable contests, at least for a round 2 showdown. You can see this big $25 GPP is $250K in prizes. And it is a 5th to first place, so 20% to first, which isn't horrible, but it's not ideal. So I'm probably not going to be max entering that or anything like that. In terms of the other GBPs, you do have this big 555 again. I believe it's a 12 max like it normally is. It is also pretty top heavy with it being 25% to first place. You've also got this 4 max that's $250 a piece to go out there and enter. What I like about this is that you don't have a ton of entries to go out there and enter. It's still pretty top heavy. You can see there, it's still 20% out there to first place, but you have a better chance at beating just over 200 entries than you do beating 12,000. Like you have that big $25. So, if you're going to enter one of those lottery kind of contests, I would probably prefer this $250  4 max. You've also got the long drives, right? Your single entries out there for tomorrow. This one is a 6th over there to first place, which is a little bit better than those GPPs. And because it is smaller, they're just over 300 entries. I actually really like this contest over there for your tomorrow. You've also got some other smaller $100 single entries. And what I'm looking for here is, let's see if they have that $10 18 max. That's always something I'm always trying to show you guys over there in chat. Let's see. So yeah, they do have that one posted. You can see that they're 10K in prizes, going to be 1K to first, which is 10% out there to first place. That is the ideal payout structure that you're looking for. Then you want 10% of that over there to 10th place. Shout out DGen75, by the way, for giving me that rule of thumb. It's, in my opinion, very sharp. We're going out there and finding a good payout structure. And you can see there, right, that fits his rule of thumb when it comes to finding some of these contests. So you have that contest to go out there and enter some of those single entries that I think make a lot of sense. You've also got these like $12 single entries. You've got the $33 single entries you can go out there and check out as well, that all have pretty decent payout structures. Like this $33 one's perfect, right? It's another 10% out there to first. Another one, it's a little bit higher than 10%, right? Out there to 10th place, but I would say pretty decent payout structure there too. And then this $12 that we scrolled by a little bit before, it's a good payout structure too, right? It's 10% over there to first place, a little bit over, right? That 10% over there to 10th place. It's a smaller contest, right? So that's why, right? It's not going to be 10% over there to 10th place. But these sort of contests are what a lot of you should be entering. If you're entering all your lineups out there into the big drive the green, right? Big $5 GBP, or even the sand trap, the big $25 GBP, you're going like, oh, I'm just entering 5 lineups in there, Luke, right? What's the big deal with going out there and doing that? if you're entering 5 lineups against guys that can 150 max like myself, I mean, you're going to get crushed long term, especially with how top heavy these top contests are. Right? As I said, it's a fifth out there to first place. I mean, of your top end money, I mean, it's what, 80 grand over here with these top 3 spots. 90 grand, close to 100 grand of the 250K through your top 6 spots. Right? You're not taking one of these top 10 spots, top 5 spots like you have there on the leaderboard. You're going to have a hard time making money long term. And the rake on these contests is also some of the highest that we have all throughout DraftKings. So, you can enter these if you know what you're getting into. Like if you know that it's going to be a lottery, right? You're going to go out there, you're going to lose money most times that you're entering it, right? Like you don't enter the lottery thinking you're going to make money, right? Buying scratch off tickets or going out there and playing the Powerball, right? Like you know what you're getting into, right? You're most likely just lighting your money on fire. If you're going to enter this $5 or $25 GBP, you should have that same kind of mindset about it. And I'll enter the big $5 from time to time. Like I'm not against entering 50 lineups over there, but I'm not expecting massive ROI on all those lineups for every single slate that I'm entering. Now, if I want to be more serious about it, like I usually am, and my more sustainable exposure, that's where the single entries come in. That's where that big $250 4 max comes into play. Just make sure you're catering your exposure for the kind of contest that makes sense for you. In terms of your lineup construction, I'm going to be targeting a lot of those PM players, as I was saying before. But outside of that, it's also just making sure that I'm not too chalky about my exposure. And because it's round 2 showdown, we don't have a lot of egregious chalk, I'd say, over there in your lineups. As long as you're not just picking guys off, right, starting in the top 25 or so, you're probably going to be okay over there with your lineup. So I'm going to throw a Ludwig in here. He's starting in the PM wave for sure. I'm also going to throw in a Shane Lowry, who we mentioned a few times already, probably due for a little bit of regression. Will Zalatoris, another PM wave player that also had really good irons today. And I want to double check on Willie just to make sure. But yeah, he's going to be a PM wave player like what we're looking for there. That leaves us at $7,500 remaining. And just to remind you guys, it does only go down to $6 grand out there for tomorrow. No more 5K range like we had out there for main slate. So let's go to the top end of the 7K range and find somebody to mix in. We're looking for a PM wave guy that, ideally relatively low owned would be the best case scenario. Let's go with a Wyndham Clark. He's maybe a little bit more expensive than what I wanted there, but we can probably still make it work salary wise. Let's see. Is Dietrich PM wave? I got to double check on that one. He's going to be a PM wave over there for round number 2. So let's throw him in there as well. And then for your last man in, that puts you at about $6,800. You could use pretty much whoever the hell you wanted to, because we already have pivots in play for like 3 or even 4 of our first 5 spots. I mean, even the guys that aren't pivots, right? Like an Obear, maybe a Lowry, they're in the 8K range, are lower owned than a lot of the other guys that are priced around them. The reason why I wouldn't say they're pivots is because they're 9 and 10K guys, right? They're just going to carry ownership by default. Because we've got guys like Zalatoris, Clark, Dietrich kind of getting us different to the field, even if you played a Hadwin or a Cantor, even McGreevy, I'd say, over here at $6,800, that might be a little bit more popular than some of the other guys around him. You get away with it in the large field GPP because you've already started to compensate for that ownership. But let's say you were being a lot chalkier with some of the other players that you were taking. Well, maybe that's where you need to rethink some of your ownership going forward. So I would say ideally you still want to take a pivot down here towards the bottom end of the board, right? Just because you can take chalk doesn't mean it's a good thing. And especially when it's a round 2 showdown where the current placement means nothing out there for your actual score, you want to get as different and as nasty about it as you possibly can. So, my favorite last man in this kind of range would not be your guys that are like -3, -4. It'd be your guys like -1, maybe even par, right? I'd be going out there and mixing in help, maybe even like 1 or 2 over par, right? Not the best form over there from today, to try and get even more leverage over there into my lineup. So hopefully it gives you guys an idea of how to go out there and build. And that, of course, was the thought process over there for large field GPPs. Single entries, cash lineups, right? It's a different thought process. You don't have to be as different about the exposure that you're going out there and entering. But I would say even in those single entries, we're only entering against like a couple hundred other people. Having low ownership on a player is not a bad thing, right? If you have somebody that you think is a nutted play over there for tomorrow, maybe their ball striking stats look great, they're a good round 2 scorer over there on the stone. Maybe you like the fact that they're a high upside, high birdie percentage player, especially on the par 5s that you have 4 of around here. You can still play them even if they didn't have the best day. And you have someone around them, maybe they project just a little bit better because of how they played in round number 1. take the pivot, right? If you have enough of a semblance of hope to go out there and play them, especially for round 2 showdown, because what you get after a 1 round sample size are all the overreactions, right? Guys saying that players are broken, right? After an 18-hole sample size. Golf is tough, and especially around a TPC Sawgrass, which is one of the most difficult tracks that we have around the PGA Tour. So just remind yourselves of that sometimes, especially when we get to, the more difficult golf courses and tournaments that we have on the entire schedule. This isn't really one of them. Normally, this one's like middle of the pack in difficulty. It's playing a little bit harder this year, I would say. But like, US Open, Masters, right? You've got to kind of learn to forgive and forget a little bit out there on these players, because you're going to see a lot of them go out there and struggle. So, I think perfect example of that from today, Hideki Matsuyama. He was absolutely horseshit. He lost my bet on his pars or better after like 4 holes or something like that. 5 holes, I guess, after his 14th today. He was +5 through his first 8 holes. Just horrendous stuff, right? Ended up +2 when it was all said and done. And, I think a lot of people were probably writing him off, right? After those first 8 holes. Imagine this same sort of bounce back happening, right? But now they have a clean slate, right? They start tomorrow. Everyone starts tomorrow the same way, right? They start with 0 DraftKings points. They're going to have 18 holes to go out there and play. Now, PM guys might have slightly better conditions, right? So maybe it's not completely fair out there to every single player, but the point remains, right? Just because somebody played poorly today does not mean that it's going to sustain its way the entire way throughout the event, and especially out there for just an 18-hole sample size tomorrow. So if I'm going to leave you with anything, it's get nasty about your exposure, and don't be afraid to go out there and take some low-owned players. Let's see. How's Nikolai Højgaard looking? And you said 100% agree with my contest selection. I appreciate that, man. Let's take a look at Nico for you. You're looking for a little deep dive. So he lost in the 3 tee to green categories. That's not great. And then gained 3 strokes putting. It's kind of a red flag, I'd say, because he's more of a ball striker, more of a tee to green player than he is a putter. But the putter could be looked at as a positive because he normally isn't very good on the greens, but he was able to go out there and make putts today. So, it's all going to come down to the tee to green for Nico. If he's going to go out there and shoot like -3, -4, it's usually not because he's gaining with the putter. You saw what that got him today, right? He gained with the putter and he still shot +1, right? So it's like whatever, right? Kind of thing out there with Nikolai Højgaard. But if he's going out there and gaining 3 strokes tee to green, like he's more than capable of, I'd say he'd have a better chance of being like 3-4 under par. So, low owned flyer play is, I guess, what you're looking at there with Nico. He said, damn, Damon went birdie free. Indeed he did, Ross. He did not have his best day, and it was the putter. It wasn't for lack of birdie chances, that was for sure. When you lose 4 strokes putting, you weren't getting anything to drop. In fact, look at the ball striking stats. 13 of 14 fairways, 12 of 18 greens was really good for the morning wave. Guy is just allergic to getting the ball into the hole. But like I said over there with not overreacting to the 18-hole sample sizes, right? Just like Hideki, imagine if the putts start to drop. Look at this for Joel, by the way. And he's in the PM wave. Already told you that he's probably going to be in play for me. But look at this. His first hole of the day, he hits a dart, he misses it, right? The second one's a par 5. He hits it to like 15 feet, he misses it. Now, that was a long putt, whatever, right? But he hits a dart at 4. He misses it. Now, bad hole there, whatever. Dart, he misses it. 20-footer, he misses it. 9, he has like a 15-footer. He misses it. 15's a par 5, also like a 15-footer. He misses it. 10, he was like 20 feet. He was just off the green. Misses it. You get the point at this point, right? He had a few holes where he kind of sucked, mostly where he made bogeys in that double that you saw there. But it was just birdie look after birdie, like another one here, right? 16, he had a reasonable look, couldn't go out there and make it. If these guys start to get the putts to drop like Hideki did on his back 9, watch out. Could be a low round, that's for sure. Alrighty, guys, that is all I've got out there for the live stream today. Going to go ahead and cut it off now at this point. Got to get to dinner. Also got to get some projections up over there on my Patreon page out there for my subscribers and whatnot. But best of luck over there with all of your exposure out there for tomorrow. Smash that like button for the SHIPIT Nation crew if you guys haven't already. And also subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. Rounds 3 and 4, I'll be doing the same thing over here on SHIPIT Nation. But for all the round 2 prop and betting stuff, make sure to check out my channel out there for that. That'll be live either later tonight or tomorrow morning. I haven't quite decided quite yet, but over there on my X/Twitter, I'll be tweeting out when I get all of that sorted. But for like the DraftKings and underdog stuff, also some of your 3 balls and matchups, that's where I'll be doing that over there on my YouTube channel. But until then, that is all I've got over there for the round 2 live stream. Looking forward to being out there on the golf course once again, and hopefully it's sweating a GPP takedown tomorrow. But that's all I've got, guys. I appreciate you, and I'll see you guys for all of that out there tomorrow.